Nicolas, good to see you. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good stuff. So we're in sunny Soho today, recording the AI Revolution show. Give us one sentence on Attio for those that don't know what it is.
Yeah. So firstly, thanks for having me. Really excited to do this. Attio is an AI CRM for the next generation of companies. And very happy to and excited to tell you about all about it today.
Like, why build Attio? Was it some horror story you've had from like using the Salesforce over the years, which is quite often the case?
Yeah, so it's funny because I think that often the sort of genesis stories of companies get retrofitted afterwards, and you sort of glamorize it and have this sort of perfect narrative. But actually, the story of Attio is a relatively organic one, and it's a series of escalations that essentially led us to taking on the larger software category. But where it really started was I worked in VC, and while I was working in VC, I had a thesis that we could be doing more with our email and calendar. It was as simple as that. It was like, I keep on asking questions and the answers are here. And I keep on, reaching out to people who have already been reached out to, etc. So I built a very, very simple tool. This is pre-vibe coding, so manually coded, a very simple tool to essentially tell me if someone in the fund had spoken to someone before. And that's all it did. Didn't think about it much. It was a tool we used every day. It was very helpful, but it was never designed to be a business. And fast forward a year or two later, and I was increasingly sort of driven to build things and not be in VC. And so I left to start a company. I didn't know what company I was going to start. And I released this thing. I rebuilt this thing and released this thing as a side project. And it got traction. And that's how I got into CRM.
Do you ever think, obviously, given the massive advancements I think we've seen certainly this year around AI Claude Code, for instance, obviously Lovable, Lovable, one of your customers, if you had that available when you built that tool, like, would anything have changed?
Yes, a lot would have changed. I mean, Attio, the previous company that started before that, Fundstack, were bootstrapped at the beginning. And that bootstrapping phase was slow. I mean, it was like just everything took 10 times longer than it would take today. So that time frame could have been compressed. But actually, I think what's different now is that the expectations are also higher. And this is literally a few years difference, right? We're not talking about sort of 20 years ago. We're talking about a few years ago. The expectations have changed so much that while, sure, I could have built that version faster, the bar has risen so much. So it probably wouldn't cut it. I think there's always this assumption that when things get easier to do, we'll just do the same thing with less. But actually, the expectation is do more. So I think like the dynamics have changed too much.
And what about your own thought process though of going into like building a new CRM, right? In that Salesforce is a behemoth, the market leader. Certainly for many years may still be the case, but I think the view was that to build a successful company or VC-backed company, you want to be the category leader, right? Coming into that, knowing there's so many CRMs, knowing Salesforce is, I don't know how many billions of revenue they're doing at the moment. Like, what motivated you to do that and say, hey, do you know what, we're going to take on this space which is already crowded, which already has a clear market leader, for you to think that you're going to win and get VC capital behind that? Yeah,
so I think the important thing is that we didn't think about it too much. And actually, if we had thought about it, we might not have done it. And we had just enough of an inkling of what needed to be done, but not enough to put us off, basically. And the driving force for us was a little bit of disbelief that in a world of really good software and really good tools, that the biggest one and the most successful one was Salesforce. It was just complete cognitive dissonance to us that we seeing these incredible companies being built, incredible products being built, and none of that philosophy was carried into the Salesforce product. And so that was really just enough for us to think this could be done better. We also had a lot of theses about malleability of software, a lot of theses about scale and the importance of high-resolution data. And so we, for example, say Salesforce doesn't collect high-resolution data natively. I mean, you can do it with add-ons and point solutions or whatever, but it doesn't do it. And so we had all these theses, and it gave us just enough conviction to kind of tip us over the edge. But again, we were naive enough to take that leap. And I think you almost get to a point, this is why often innovation comes from outside of industries, is because when you know too much, you're sort of scared off. And I'm glad that we didn't.
Good. Yeah. Very good. And then what are your thoughts? I guess a couple of things sort of segueing on that, right? One, maybe we'll just start with this one. So if you look at the incumbents and Salesforce and HubSpot in particular, and HubSpot have really grown into the CRM space over the last few years, but they've come from it from a non-AI native perspective. And so ultimately they're in a position where they're going to have to build AI on top of what they've already got, versus where you've come from an AI native perspective. So how can maybe or can they, these existing legacy, let's say CRMs, win and adapt and become AI native versus let's say the newer truly AI native companies like yourselves?
Yeah. So I think I'm not sure how helpful the AI native versus not AI native distinction is, because there are going to be some incredible companies in the AI era that were not born AI native. And companies that we already can see have amazing traction. So Replit, right, which wasn't born as a agentic coding platform, but actually had all of the pieces necessary for it to massively seize the opportunity. And there are companies like Clay, again, an amazing go-to-market success story in the go-to-market space, founded a long time before LLMs or before mainstream sort of available LLMs. And so I think like the pre or post AI native thing is not that helpful. I think what's more interesting is the architecture of these products and how well suited, a lot of it by luck, but how well suited they are to add these new capabilities. And so I think that in the CRM space, it's a mixed bag. If you've built really, really good infrastructure and you can handle a lot of data and you can provide context to models and you have all of the governance and all of those things around that data, then you're actually in a pretty good spot. And if you then adapt quickly to the kind of to the new capabilities, then I think you have a good chance. So I don't think it's like I think it's a sort of more complicated story. Now, Attio has always had this thesis about high resolution data, flexibility of that data, the quantity of that data, and so we're incredibly well placed to build on top of the capabilities of these LLMs, but others will be, to varying degrees, will be as well.
I'm sure you must have some opinions on, I'm speaking to a lot of founders and we're seeing it, on LinkedIn or on podcasts where even, let's say founder of Klarna, and I don't know if he retracted this, but, talk about you just replace Salesforce or replace your CRM and just build it yourself. So like something as, let's say, as complex as a CRM, what are your thoughts around maybe those founders that are thinking, do you know what, we can just build all this tech that we're paying for, especially, in the CRM, ourselves?
People will do that. I don't think it's the right thing to do. And the reasons are varied, but I think the primary reasons are, number one, if a member of if our team came and said, we're going to rebuild our HR solution, or we're going to rebuild Slack or something like that, you would tell them it's a terrible idea. It's just there is even if it was free to do that, even if someone paid us to take a solution, to build a vibe coded solution, it wouldn't be the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think that companies, especially young companies, should be pouring all of their effort into building their own product and putting all of that brain power into solving problems there, not solving problems that are being solved by other companies.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is that code generation is a small part of building a product, and actually if you look at what sort of scaled software companies spend on actually writing code, it's not that much. It's maybe 15% of their budget would be considered as being spent on actually writing code, and there's a lot of stuff that comes outside of that. Which is keeping all the data secure, keeping it scalable, building all of the content for training and all those sorts of things. So there's a lot more you have to do than just write the code. And I also think that the expectations of what software are changing really rapidly. So you go and vibe code a solution, and most of the vibe coded solutions we see would be nice products 5 years ago, but they're not where the puck is going. And so I think with your vibe coded solution, you're very likely to kind of be behind the curve, and all of the stuff that we're doing is so far beyond the frontier of what can be purely vibe coded. Now, I still think there is an incredible space for vibe coding in companies, and we build a lot of software for internal consumption. So we are like big advocates of it, but we build it in places where there isn't an incredible solution, when we're not looking at kind of like mission critical customer data, those sorts of things. And we vibe code a lot on top of these platforms. So we vibe code a lot on top of Attio. Attio is a fantastic SDK. You can build and customize to your heart's, as much as you like.
Yeah.
And so I think, if you have that inkling and you see the value of that customization, I would say the best thing to do is look for building a software stack that is compatible with that, but don't reinvent things that are being done really well.
Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense, and I'm hearing from some very smart people, including yourself, exactly this, right? If a solution already exists, or if an AI agent already exists, why build it yourself, right? Focus on the things, maybe the 10 or 20% that doesn't exist, and,
exactly,
and do that. And actually, ourselves, SaaS Doc is not a software company. We serve the B2B software market. We run conferences, we run community, but now because of vibe coding tools, where we are building, vibe coded solutions. For certain pain points that we don't have the software for, which is really great to see.
Totally.
And, team members that have no skill. In fact, even just one sort of anecdotal story, we had a colleague who just came back from maternity leave not long ago, and I asked her, I said, within the community product that we offer, we're missing, this and this, right? Can you go on to Lovable and build this for us? She said to me, what's Lovable? And I was like, how can you work at SaaS Doc and not know what Lovable was? But she'd been off for the last year, right? So
that's a long time.
It's a long time in
this
today's
world,
but without knowing what Lovable was, within 3 weeks, she built it.
Amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was just, I was like, we needed this for 2 years, and this is what vibe coding is about.
I can give you a couple of our own sort of anecdotes. So one of the things that we have built internally, vibe code internally, is an app for buying out of home. So we buy a lot of billboards, we buy a lot of bus shelters, and all that kind of stuff. And choosing the locations is really difficult. And so we built an internal app that shows us heat maps of things, social media location data like Strava heat maps, all these sorts of things. So we can see, is this billboard we're buying, does it have good foot traffic? It will give you a sort of rendering of different angles from Google Street View, all these kind of things. That tool just doesn't exist. It's really helpful. It's been really great for us for the last few months, and that's a great example of vibe coding providing massive value. Equally, on top of Attio, we've built our own startup program discount calculator that's built inside the CRM on top of our Attio SDK, and we've extended the functionality for our team, very specific to our startup program. And now that kind of like last mile customization has been done super, super quickly, makes Attio 10x for this use case for us internally. Another great example of how powerful this can be.
Are you using testing all the vibe coding platforms, Lovable, Replit, even sort of Claude Code? Have a favorite?
I have a favorite.
Yeah.
For me, it's Claude Code.
Yeah.
But I think that's just because I'm an engineer by background,
yeah.
and so I kind of I love the UI. I love how it feels. I love that it's kind of agnostic of the IDE and the environment that the code runs in, all those kind of things. But internally, we use all sorts of things. We use V0, we use Replit, we use Lovable, and we kind of give the team free rein to decide which tools they want to use.
Yeah.
And honestly, the capabilities, the models, and the tools are changing so quickly that the leaderboard is in constant flux. I mean, it's like one day everyone loves this tool, the next day another one. But
But maybe just on that, and I guess there's sort of two. The question I was going to ask, it was in my mind that a lot of, let's say, because we serve, let's say, a lot of traditional SaaS companies that are having to adapt to AI. And what we can see, over the last 6 to 12 months is there's a lot of noise out there, but is AI killing SaaS, right? Yeah. And this is what they're wondering, with all the developments that are happening, is SaaS sort of like dying? So I want your perspective on that, but to your point about Claude Code being your favorite. Maybe you can answer this as well. Is AI killing AI, right? Because you also see that, is Claude Code now making Lovable and, Replit sort of replaceable? So,
So the first thing was, is AI killing SaaS? Yeah. I think the answer to that is yes, to a large degree it is. And I don't think that there is, I think this gets confused with this being the end of software.
Yeah.
And I think that this is same as the shift to the cloud or anything. It's probably bigger, but the same kind of spirit of things, which is that the expectations have changed, and software is going to look very, very different. It's going to be autonomous. It's going to be about massive customization. It's going to do the work for you in the background. And this is what we see with Attio, right? Every day, Attio is doing a ton of work for our customers and providing real value. And I think so. There's a massive expectation shift, and a lot of companies won't adapt to these new expectations, and they'll be in a tough spot. Now, at the same time, we're going to see incredible new companies be created, and we're going to see companies go through this transition very, very successfully. In a couple of years, the software landscape will look very different. The winners will look very different, but there will be really brilliant, successful software companies. And so I don't think that this is, it's kind of, it's a massive paradigm shift, and it's kind of like a do or die situation.
Yeah. It's an exciting time to be in software, right? Probably one of the most exciting times that we can recall, right? But also with that, comes that natural fear, uncertainty, and doubts, right? Yeah,
but it's good, because this is kind of I sort of the reason that a lot of people get into software is because they like building things, they like creating things, and for a long time it felt kind of stagnant, and for a long time it felt like progress was really incremental, and the biggest technical shift was going from React 15 to 16 or whatever. And there was like these very, very slow changes, and we were kind of doing a lot of playbooky stuff. There was just a way that you did things, and SaaS got to the point where it was kind of formulaic. These are the expectations. This is what margin looks like. This is what your cog should be. This is what a disabled state for a button should look like. Everything had just been refined to the nth degree, and we're now in a world where none of that is true anymore. Like nobody knows the answers, And it's much more interesting. I mean, it's much more interesting to be building a company in a time when everything has to be figured out than you're just sort of copying what's been done before. And so I think it's very motivating. Yeah.
What about, so we've heard some of the examples of how you're using software and AI, and also, you know, what you're seeing in the market. What about the impacts of AI, let's say, on the human workforce?
Yeah.
Because also what we're reading and seeing a lot that, okay, don't hire, companies are reducing their headcount, right? Don't hire any more humans, replace them with agents. You know, some companies, you know, have gone down from 20 to 3 and are running multiple agents and managing the agents.
Yeah.
But then you also see companies like Claude, for instance, who are hiring bucket loads of humans and salespeople, and they're not, you know, they're not. I don't know if they're using AI SDRs, right?
Yeah.
But what's the perspective from the Attio sort of point of view? You know, have you stopped hiring? What?
No, we've very much not stopped hiring. I think that it's overblown. And I think in most cases, it's really good air cover for fixing other organizational problems. Software companies have definitely been run in a very bloated, inefficient way. And because there was always this kind of this mindset of sort of deferring the point at which we're going to actually make money. So we'll continue to grow and all those sorts of things, but infinitely deferring this into the future. Efficiency has never been that important. I think what's happening recently is that because a lot of the growth rates of these big companies have started to slow, and a lot of the private market companies are accelerating in growth, the expectations, investors' expectations have rapidly changed. And there's basically only two ways now to survive as a software company. You either are making money, real money, or you're growing like crazy. And the companies that have been caught in the middle have, you know, it's easier probably for them to just say, okay, no, we're just going to make real money than it is for them to say, we're going to massively accelerate our growth rate. That's actually quite difficult to do. So I think a lot of them are just are taking that track of saying, well, if we cut our workforce by 30%, things look much better. And there is actually capacity to do that because they've overhired, et cetera. So they can do that. Now, when you look at the high growth companies, it's quite a different story. And actually, the funny thing is, if you look at like the frontier labs, they're the ones that are growing headcount the fastest. And you might have seen the other day, OpenAI said that they're going to double their headcount in the next 12 months. At a company with thousands of employees, that's going to be a lot of new jobs. And so I think that the replacement of human labor is largely overblown, and I think it's going to change massively. But at least we're definitely not seeing it now. Of course, with any kind of technical revolution of the scale of what we're going through now, expectations escalate massively. And so it is not about, you know, I think this is the thing that we really internalize. It is not about doing what we would have done before, but now because we can do it 10x easier, we're just going to have a tenth of the workforce. We're going to have the same size workforce, but we're going to expect 10 times the output. And it's always been like that. And so, so the expectations, the bar rises, and then you need the workforce empowered by incredible tools to hit this new bar.
Do you think then it is just, let's say, PR when I read things which I haven't verified or see things on TikTok where it says, like, you know, Claude is running its marketing with one person and, you know, a bunch of agents?
No, I don't think that's PR. I think that you could absolutely run you could run growth marketing with one person. But I'm also absolutely certain that Anthropic will be growing its marketing department. You know, there's no doubt about that. But again, the expectations of what that marketing department is going to do are going to be massive. And so one person can do much more, but the expectations of what the company as a whole does are also an order of magnitude greater.
I've also, like, you know, I think like everybody within the space, you know, trying to digest a lot of information, read, you know, listen to a lot of podcasts, I've heard it, several sources saying, the TAM for software in general is going to increase
Explode.
by 100x,
yeah,
right?
Totally.
With that, and maybe like specifically to the B2B GTM sort of software market, like where do you see that in 2 years? Is it going to be just this incredibly crowded space?
Yeah.
How can people win in this market? What are your thoughts on in 2 years' time for B2B software GTM?
Yeah, so I think that disclaimer is that things are moving really quickly, and we're gonna find out. But fundamentally, we have a thesis on this, which is that it's going to be extremely important, especially when we think about how we position Attio in the market. We think that largely these systems are going to be autonomous, and so you are going to be building incredibly powerful autonomous systems that don't need to be sort of driven and manned by people, will be designed and kind of monitored by people, but fundamentally will be able to run and scale autonomously. In that world, I think platforms become really, really, really important. And it becomes really important that you have a platform that is able to kind of store all the data that you need, that has all the context that you need, and importantly, that is malleable enough to actually mold to what you're trying to do. And so we're very bullish on platforms. We're very bullish on consolidation, actually. And again, for all of the same reasons, it's when you're running multiple agents, and Attio handles millions and millions and millions of automations a day. And to be able to do that in a way that's kind of transactionally consistent, where things don't conflict, all of those sorts of things, and then you can ultimately provide a customer a good experience because you don't have two agents competing against each other to chat to them. Platforms become really important. Data becomes really important. I think the tough spot is point solutions, where you sort of do a small piece of that, and also because building sort of these point solution features has become so much easier. That market's getting really, really crowded, and they're being absorbed into the platforms. And so I think we're very bullish on these kind of large autonomous platforms.
What are you? So I'm pretty sure, because I'm speaking to them on a regular basis through what we do with SaaS Doc, right? But there'll be SaaS founders that are listening to this, right, who are worried, haven't taken any action.
Yeah.
Like just as an example, and this is not breaking confidence, like we're running these AI town halls on a monthly basis with our SaaS Doc founder membership, and actually the majority in there are very concerned that AI is killing their business, because these are 5-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old like SaaS companies, right? And I think that's fair and sort of natural. But most of them have kind of taken action. I think like one or two are like, yeah, we're reading about AI and like looking at like what we should do. If you're that person that hasn't done anything yet, and you've got a couple of million ARR, what is your advice like to them, listening and watching this today? That what are the things that they need to do to kind of really be around in 5 years' time?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is to just confront the situation in the most honest way that you can, which is that not thinking about it or ignoring it, etc. It doesn't change anything, right? It's here, it's happening, and I think you've got to accept that. I think the next step is to actually get excited about what's happening. So you go through this process of like, oh no, everything's changing, but actually it represents one of the biggest opportunities that we've ever had. And actually, if you think about it, it's an extraordinary time to be building software, to be on this planet. I mean, it's really something cool to live through. And so all of the kind of entrepreneurial spirit and determination and grit that made you start your company, get to a few million in revenue, all of those things are going to serve you really, really well in this amazing new frontier of software. But you've got to participate. And so the first thing I would say is kind of take all of that energy and start experimenting, start using the tools, start building things, start living at the edge of what's capable. and embrace the fact that we're in this incredibly exciting new time. And I think that I think that it's a wonderful opportunity to have a couple of million in revenue, a team and capital to do things and to participate, and don't miss the opportunity.
I don't know how many interviews do you think you've done in your short period of running Attio?
Between 5 and 10.
Only 5 and 10?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I thought you were going to say hundreds.
No.
Okay, I guess you've been focused on building.
Very much
I
so.
see that actually a lot with, again, like we use the term sort of AI-native sort of founders, but they're quite good at, let's say, not accepting invites to conferences or podcasts because they just want to build, right? Because of the speed of things.
You could fill your calendar.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess kind of on that, maybe like what's something that you never or very rarely get asked about Attio that you maybe like to be asked or talk about?
That's an interesting one. It's a really interesting one. So I think that there are I guess there are two ways to answer this. I think one is about the sort of like the real nitty gritty about why we're building is so powerful. So a lot of people just focus on AI CRM, but very rarely ask about the real specifics of why Attio is so well placed to win. So I can go into that first. The big thing for us is the depth that we have gone to build the data layer and the automation layer on top, and marrying these things super closely together is what provides all the value. So at the base layer of Attio is something that we call particle, which is, I can pretty confidently say, I'm going to say this with a high degree of confidence, the most scalable data layer of any CRM out there. And it is very, very flexible. It's a full kind of object model. So what that means is you can really map how your business works. If your business is a two-sided marketplace, no problem. If you have mixed motions, so product-led growth and outbound and inbound and enterprise sales, no problem at all. It can all be modeled. If you have a specific way about thinking of accounts and territories and whatever, no problem. And so I think, so that's a really, really big part of it. But what we've been adding recently is this idea of universal context, which essentially puts embeddings into all of this for free. It just happens. You don't have to think about it. And it makes Attio an incredible context engine for agents, for chat interfaces like Claude Cowork, etc. And so I think on the data layer, from a technical perspective, from a product perspective, we have something really, really powerful and really unique. And then the next thing is the automation layer on top. And there's a lot of very, very cool things we're about to announce. I'll talk about what we currently have, which is an automation layer which allows you to kind of slide between probabilistic and fully deterministic workflows. So some things you just want to happen the same way every single time. The way you do forecasting, you don't want there to be any kind of randomness in there. But there are other things where you need that probabilistic stuff when you're dealing with messy communication data, etc. And so the automation layer that we've built on top runs millions and millions of automations and runs the go-to-market for some really great companies now. But people very, very rarely want to go into the kind of technical details. The second thing that people tend to brush over is the actual reality of starting a company. And I catch myself forgetting, honestly, because when you get to a certain point, you have the trauma, it just gets ejected from your brain. But I think it's important for companies that are sort of scaling up to be honest about what that took and to not paint an overly rosy picture, because because it's really brutal.
Yeah.
And that's rarely spoken about.
No, for sure. And actually, it's one of the things that I love speaking about. And historically, certainly on the SaaS Revolution show, like podcasts, and maybe with that is like you mentioned, obviously the words trauma, but I think it's certainly fair. But we think about starting a business is incredibly hard, right? Keeping the lights on, very difficult. Scaling a business, even harder. Very few people manage to do that, and so obviously you're now in this kind of scaling phase. For yourself, like personally, going through this, like how do you look after yourself to kind of just ensure that, look, like every day is not going to be easy. We've got like huge goals, so much going on. Like how do you look after yourself to kind of get through, every day, every week,
so it's really changed. So I think now it's a much more sustainable situation. And that's just because we've got to the point where we've been able to attract really great talent. We've got an amazing leadership team. We've got the team behind Attio is the strongest it's ever been. So for all of those reasons, it's easier now than it's ever been, and I now have a bit more headspace and time, etc. But the answer, like before all of this, and when we were 5 people in a co-working space for multiple years, the answer is I kind of didn't, and that was actually wrong. It was detrimental, and I think that in the moment you always think that just one more hour of work, just if I just work this weekend, it will kind of. But actually, you do yourself a disservice. There is one thing that I did do, which was really helpful, which is that you have these massive ups and downs, and there are times when something happens and you think we're gonna absolutely crush it, we're top of the world. You've got this huge adrenaline rush, and there are other times when you think it's all over. This is the dumbest idea ever, and absolutely certain this is going to fail. I think what I did do well is in those situations, which happen a lot, is to not do anything about it and essentially give myself a week. So every time you have these moments where you're like, "That's it, it's finished." What I did is like, okay, cool, good thought. Take the week just to not think about it anymore. Just be on autopilot. And actually in those weeks, it's kind of difficult to really push, but it's okay. You give yourself a break. You just kind of do your regular stuff, keep things moving. And inevitably a week later, you feel quite differently. So I think a large part of us getting this far can be attributed to just not reacting to the kind of doomsday scenarios. And just giving it time to play out.
I think a lot of people listening, can relate to that. So thank you for sharing. And look, we're in, I think just over 6 months' time in October. You're coming to SaaS Europe in Dublin to speak for the first time. So really excited about that. I'm almost certain the world of software is going to have changed so much
massively
by then. So it's going to be really interesting, and maybe looking back on the conversation that we're having today in October.
Yeah, it will all seem so old-fashioned and ridiculous.
Exactly how out of date everything we said was. But we're really excited for you speaking at SaaS Europe. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure, really enjoyable.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.